This is Dustin J. Markowitz coming to you taped on location from Elite Pro Shop in beautiful Fort Mojave, Arizona, bringing you this special edition of Bowling Evolved. You know, it's been a couple months since we've been on the air. We've been doing a lot of things, and as you well know, starting next month, we become a twice-a-month vodcast. That's right, a video podcast for you, the bowlers, the talk show by row bowlers, for row bowlers, along with my partner. Unfortunately, he was not here right now. He was preparing for the Senior U.S. Open in Las Vegas. We wish him the best luck, Mr. Eric Forkel. We're all cheering you on. We've had a lot of fun getting this together. Our new editor, AJ Anthony Jordan, who's in the background right now. Say hi, AJ.
Hello.
AJ's done a great job putting some stuff together. We also have Fred Eisenhammer now, of course, writing on our Bowling Evolve page, which you can look at the link right here, bowlingevolve.com, which goes directly to our Facebook page. Also, if you do happen to want to look at Elite Pro Shop, I want to thank them for this wonderful thing. I don't know how well you can see it on the camera, but this is actually a Brunswick Bowling Center from 1915. It's a picture she has in here, really amazing. And what's even more amazing, my guest today actually managed and bowled in that center when he first started bowling, as he's laughing off camera. But with that being said, because the U.S. Open, the Senior U.S. Open, is this weekend, I want to introduce my very special guest. He's a three-time PBA national champion, the 1992 U.S. Open champion, and of course, as I know him, the man who gave me my very first break as a contracted staffer with Brunswick Bowling back in 2007 when he gave a 21-year-old kid a shot with the big company. The one, the only, Robert Lawrence. Robert, thank you so much for being here, buddy.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I gotta say, you have a lot more hair than Eric, so no, I'm kidding.
It's hanging in there. It's hanging in there.
Well, of course, as I mentioned, you were a 1992 U.S. Open champion. You are going to be participating in the U.S. Open as well for the seniors this weekend and are coming up in June. And tell me, you know, I hear a lot of people say that the majors are such a big difference than the other standard tournaments, be it a regional, national, whatever the case is.
Yeah.
As a champion and someone who's bowled the grind on both the regular tour and the senior tour, what difference is it, and what does it mean to you to know that you've succeeded where a lot of people haven't?
Well, you know, every tournament, you know, winning any tournament's fun. But it just seems like when you get to the majors, you know, you kind of focus more, you focus harder. It just means more, but you know, each week when you like when we used to have the tour the week to week across the country, you know, you had to refocus yourself every week. You could win, you go back the next week, you got to start over from scratch and do it all over again. So it's a big mental thing when you're bowling for a living.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, tell us a little bit about the grind. I mean, you hear people talk about that the U.S. Open is the quote-unquote hardest tournament ever. I mean, so explain that. Why does it make it so difficult compared to a regular national style?
Well, I think it's a lot of things. You know, it's not always just the lane conditions. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they generally make them tough for the U.S. Open. I have bowled a few U.S. Opens that were high scoring, which was kind of surprising to pretty much everyone that was there, and a little bit disappointing for a lot of us because we want them tough. You know, but overall, it's tough conditions. It's tough, the pressure of winning a U.S. Open. Every time people say it's the toughest tournament, it keeps building that reputation. That makes it even more, you know, stressful to try to win. And as Johnny Petraglia once told me, you know, after I won, I kind of aw-shucked it a little bit, you know, later on, you know, these days. And he's like, no, don't ever forget. This was a few years ago. I don't know, the numbers probably changed, but he said, there's only been 47 people ever in the world to win a U.S. Open in bowling, and you're one of them. So he would always say that, and because he's won it once or twice.
Yeah.
And so for him, it means a lot to him, and it means a lot to me, and he reminds me of that. But the grind is just, it's everything. It's the money, it's the title more than anything. It's the lane conditions, and it's just, you know, especially nowadays, you know, you don't get as many tournaments to bowl. So when those majors pop up, it means even more because that's the most important week of the year.
Yeah. Well, I know Eric once said on the show before, he said, you know, the money comes and goes, but the title lasts forever, the glory. Yeah.
You know, it's funny you say that. I say that all the time. I said, oh, the money's been long gone. Someone said, well, when you won, you know, you only got $40,000 a year. You know, the 3 years prior were sponsored by Seagram's, so I paid $100,000, $100,000, and then $80,000, and then I won the next year for $40,000. And I went, you know what? That doesn't matter if it was $100,000 or $40,000. It's all would still be gone. But when I sit on my couch at home, up on the mantle over a fireplace, I can see my eagle. and it's still there after all these years, and it always will be. So that's what matters.
I know not too long ago I watched it on YouTube, and because you can find anything on YouTube, which by the way,
Unfortunately.
the good and the bad, of course.
Yeah.
But now let me ask you this question. Of course, the senior PBA 50 version of the U.S. Open, which is a USBC tournament, of course, but it's recognized as a pro event. How does that differ from the regular tours version of the tournament?
Well, obviously, with all the tournaments nowadays, the formats have changed a lot. I was really happy last year. We bowled 3 days worth of bowling. Then there was a semifinal round, and then we went into 24 games of match play. It felt like the old days of bowling a senior, a U.S. Open, a regular one.
Sure.
But they've changed those formats now, and you get into these weird formats, less games, weird cuts, dropping pins. There's all kind of stuff. So things have changed, over the years. But it's still, when it all comes down to that final top 4, top 5 finals, it still means the same thing. Doesn't matter how you got there. When you get to the final and you win, that's what matters.
Well, and we've always kind of talked a little bit about the controversy of bowling. That's part of what Bowling Bowl got founded on, go figure. But Eric being controversial about something, that's never happened in his entire PBA career. One thing that you hear a lot is that the formats have, some people believe it's hurt the PBA, some people believe it's helped the PBA. Where do you stand on that?
Format is in each tournament, or just the way the tours run on your own?
I guess both.
Well, I guess they're both kind of, us old timers don't like any of it really. And I say we're all very glad to still have stuff to bowl,
Sure.
but the formats are too short. There's not enough games. But in reality, when we have to stop and think about it, we understand why.
Sure.
You have a limited time to try to get as much product on TV as possible. When they do these World Series of bowling, they got to get in there and tape 4, 5, 6 shows, and they only have 10 days. So the formats can't be long, and it's financially wise. That's why it's come to this. So that's really disappointing. Is the format. All the better bowlers, and I don't hold myself to the level of some of those guys now, but all the better bowlers have always liked more games.
Sure.
So.
Well, I would still say you're probably still pretty darn good. I mean,
It comes and goes a lot more. Used to, you could ride if you were bowling good, you could ride it for weeks, and I did when 20 years ago. But now it's day to day. I can have a great day, and the next day I look like I forgot what I was doing.
So like most of us household heroes, so to speak.
Yeah. I have to explain myself sometimes to people. I've had injuries and stuff like that. So there's some days where the body works and some days where it doesn't. But I try not to use that as a crutch or an excuse. Just some people are like, well, what happened the second? It doesn't always work.
Well, I know one advantage you do have, and for those of you at home that don't know, Robert is the product specialist, as I believe he says, from LA to LA, Louisiana to Los Angeles.
I call it La La Land.
La La Land. And of course, you've been in Brunswick for a long time now. As I mentioned, you gave me my very first opportunity as an advisory staffer back in 21, and I was just getting into tournament coordinating and writing, and it was like, that to me was a dream come true, and led to, of course, years later, now I'm back as a full-time regional staffer, which is fantastic. So tell us a little bit about what you're going to be bringing with you to Vegas for the U.S. Open. What kind of equipment's going to be in your bag right now?
I got a good assortment because our arsenal is very wide range now. Obviously with 3 brands, but in the Brunswick brand, obviously it's like American Express card. I don't leave home without it. My melee jab.
Which
melee jab. Looking for trouble. There's no trouble with that ball, but that's just my. You have that one benchmark ball.
Oh, absolutely.
I like to tell people, I always find that one ball that I think I could bowl. If they told you had to go out and bowl and take one ball with you and travel all around, what would you take? I'd say melee jab. I can play the gutter with it. I can hook the whole lane with it. It's one of those balls where if you still trick your hand and do your speeds and all, the things we used to have to do, I can move all over the lane with that ball. Yeah. So that's I can throw that ball and I know which ball to go to from that also. Yeah. It's just that perfect middle ball. So, I ball up and I'll go to like a Mastermind Scholar, or I still use Original Mastermind a lot. Yeah. Love that ball. I still have the one. I finished 11th last year in the Senior US Open, and I used this one I had 2 Masterminds, originals, and I used one pretty much almost exclusively, and I brought it back with me this year. So. But Gold Rhino Pro, great ball. And now I'm really, really digging this new Soul.
Yeah.
The Soul and the Soul Mate. and something I've never done before, and 52 years old now, and about a month ago or so, I was bowling league, and we were doing a pre-bowl, but my whole team was bowling, and I bowled back-to-back 300s to start the set. And I'd never done that before in all my years of a lot of games, and I was using the original sole, or the solid sole. So, really happy with that ball.
Well, as I mentioned when I did my meet your staff for a little video, I talked about I love the versatility of the Brunswick line. And without trying to turn this too much into a Brunswick commercial, but you can go to brunswickbowling.com. AJ put the link right here. I have to agree wholeheartedly with the jab. We had talked about, Eric and I had a chance to bowl together for the first time, and we bowled the WCO doubles, and I shot 299 with the ball in competition with it. And he was throwing the jab as well, and it's just we were able to open up both sides of the lane, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. I know where to go after throwing 2 or 3 shots of that ball. I know where I need to go. More times than not, it's just staying right where I am.
Or just making, if I can make changes with my melee jab, just, adapt with it, I will first. But then, obviously the way the lanes are and the way the conditions change, it's an easy guide of which way to go, to the next ball.
Absolutely. Again, I would highly recommend anyone check out brunswickbowling.com, see all the latest and greatest from Brunswick, and of course Deviate and Radical as well. There's some great equipment out there. Before I let you go, Robert, one thing I always like to do is, we've always talked about the future of the sport, and we used to make the joke, it became a joke and it became a conversation piece, is bowling a game or a sport, which Eric has always kind of said, depending on what level it's at, it could be both, which I agree with that.
It needs to be both.
It needs to be both, absolutely. I think Norm Duke said it best when he said, if you go out and have a couple beers and throw a game, that's a game. But if you go out and you're grinding a tournament, that's a sport. Yeah. But let's look at something that a lot of people talk about, and I've always kind of liked talking to. Forgive me, because, again, I know you were working in this 1915 center back here.
I think I did the lanes. By hand. We didn't have a $30,000 lane machine.
We had a flick gun. But one thing I always like asking some of the older bowlers is, if you can change something about today's game to help make it better, what would it be? I know, like Glenn Allison kind of wished that he can bring back like some of the pride of the beer teams, and he's sort of talking about that, the traveling teams. I know Eric's talked about conditions and trying to monitor things a little better. But for you, what is it that could be changed that we did in the past that we don't do today?
Ooh, man, that's a tough one. But I think, like I grew up, my dad owned a bowling center. One thing that we always had is learn to bowl clinics. Every week we had learn to bowl classes, and we had different levels for kids. Obviously, back in the 70s, we had them for ladies because there wasn't as many ladies working in the job. So there was a lot more morning ladies leagues. Well, we had classes for ladies and senior. I mean, we need more coaching and more classes in every bowling center. I tell you what, I've been in this all my life. 60s and 70s, my dad owned a center. I owned a pro shop for 25 years. I've run a bowling center. And what I see is when in anything, not just bowling, when people don't get better or don't improve, they quit. They drop off. Whether they're showing up to just have a few beers and bowl with their friends, that's one thing. But even deep down, they still
you want to win. You want to be good.
They want to get better.
Of course.
They know they're not going to ever do it for a living, but they still want to see some improvement. I mean, I play golf, and I'm not very good. And when I stopped getting better, and I started actually going the opposite way, I stopped playing golf as much. Now I hardly play at all. And I love to play golf, but as I didn't get any better and I peaked and started going the other route, I lost interest.
Sure.
And it happens in bowling. So we need a lot more coaching and a lot more classes. I think every center in the country should have a designated, this is the pro of the center. It doesn't have to be a pro PBA member, but the designated coach of the center.
Like a house pro, so to speak. Sure.
Yeah, but there's not enough of that.
I know, and kind of reiterating on that, we've talked about on the show in the past, I've always mentioned that as scratch bowlers in general, I think a lot of times, a lot of scratch bowlers think too much about themselves and not enough, One of the things I've always been, and my mother, who runs the Elite Pro Shop here, instilled in me was working with the kids, especially. Yeah. I took my time out and I would work with the kids, and now I'm proud to say the kids that I work with are 200 average bowlers, and some of them aren't even that, but they have a love for the game and a respect. So I would say maybe even that is something that's missing, and
you're exactly right, 100% right. Too many of our bowlers have lost the love for the game, and so they're not spreading the word. Kids aren't, our kids' leagues are dwindling, and there's so much else for them to do in this day of electronics and video games, and there's a lot of things that have pulled kids away from bowling. But if they were still having fun at it and bringing their friends, it could still grow. Yeah. And so I'd see that that we have to, number one, we have to have more attention to kids. The youth bowling. Junior gold is great. There's high school bowling's continued to grow. The collegiate level's still fantastic, but deep down in the roots in every center's youth leagues are dropping. Yeah. And it's because those kids, there was a point when it was actually pretty, as a kid, it's cool to bowl. Yeah. I don't think enough kids think it's cool to bowl.
It's, it's very possible. I know, like, when I was coming up, I idolized the scratch bowlers in my house. And what was nice was when I was growing up as well, those bowlers did come down and help. And to me, it was like, wow, I'm bowling with the 200 average bowler in the house, and he's showing me what and I always say, I think you're 100% hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's just, I wish there was more that, as you said, spreading the love, because it can't always be about the money. I can't believe me.
And it's funny, we talked about that in our league the other day. Our league's kind of falling apart a little bit in this one really good league, and I said the high average bowlers are not making the average bowlers feel welcome. Mm. They're driving them off by whether they treat them bad or talk down to them or gripe about handicap all the time in front of them. And
bowlers gripe about handicap? No.
So used to you had a lot more higher level bowlers, and those were the people that went out and spread the word about bowling.
Yeah.
They're not doing that anymore, and it trickles down. And then one of the other things too is growing up in a bowling center. Our center had kids in the bowling center every night. They're in leagues. The families would come to bowl, the parents, and they'd bring the kids. The kids would run all over the bowling center, and and of course my dad owned the center. I was there every night. Mm-hmm. I had 15 to 20 friends, different friends every night that were there. Yeah. But those kids developed into bowlers because they were used to coming to the bowling center, and it just was a cycle. You don't see kids in the bowling center in the evening anymore, hardly. No. I mean, you look around, like when my league bowls, there's none. Right. And so those kids used to come in and watch the hot shot bowlers, and it just doesn't happen anymore. I don't know where it's happening, but it's not happening anywhere where I'm at.
I'm striking up my own memories now. Yeah. I very similar. My dad's ran centers. My mom had a pro shop all my life, and I was always I was always at the bowling center. And I might not have been bowling, but I was in the arcade, or I was but I was there. And well, there you go. So I'm going to throw that out to our fans again. We want to say thank you to everyone listening to the show today, seeing us. God, it's weird to say seeing us. We've been doing the podcast so long. Now we actually have video. It's a big jump. We want to throw the challenge out there. Remember, if you want to help grow the sport, take it from the one and only Robert Lawrence. He's 100% correct. Go out there, develop coaching, help the kids. Do what you can to show the love of the sport, because remember, we all used to love it at one point. I don't think anyone woke up one day and just said, I want to get a bowling ball to make a living. I think they actually had to enjoy it at one point. So, but with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to take us into the end of our interview. Again, we want to thank Robert Lawrence from Brunswick Bowling for coming down and being on our very first, teaser show of what's coming up here in the future. Very cool. Again, I kind of miss Eric, but you do well. No. Stick around, as I said, coming up in the upcoming months, we'll be doing 2 shows a month. Please check out BrunswickBowling.com, link here. AJ, if you're able to pull this off, I'm going to be so impressed. BowlingEvolve.com, link here. And, of course, check out Elite Pro Shop on Facebook here. But, ladies and gentlemen, for the one and only Robert Lawrence, I've been Dustin J. Markowitz. Have a great night.